The Blithedale Romance, written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, narrated by Nora Vasquez.
The Blithedale Romance by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Preface. In the Blithedale of this volume, many readers will probably suspect a faint and not very faithful shadowing of Brook Farm in Roxbury, which, now a little more than 10 years ago, was occupied and cultivated by a company of socialists. The author does not wish to deny that he had this community in his mind, and that, having had the good fortune for a time to be personally connected with it, he has occasionally availed himself of his actual reminiscences, in the hope of giving a more lifelike tint to the fancy sketch in the following pages. He begs it to be understood, however, that he has considered the institution itself as not less fairly the subject of fictitious handling than the imaginary personages whom he has introduced there. His whole treatment of the affair is altogether incidental to the main purpose of the romance, nor does he put forward the slightest pretensions to illustrate a theory or elicit a conclusion, favorable or otherwise, in respect to socialism. In short, his present concern with the socialist community is merely to establish a theatre, a little removed from the highway of ordinary travel, where the creatures of his brain may play their phantasmagorical antics, without exposing them to too close a comparison with the actual events of real lives. In the old countries with which fiction has long been conversant, a certain conventional privilege seems to be awarded to the romancer. His work is not put exactly side by side with nature, and he is allowed a license with regard to everyday probability, in view of the improved effects which he is bound to produce thereby. Among ourselves, on the contrary, there is as yet no such fairyland, so like the real world, that in a suitable remoteness one cannot well tell the difference, but with an atmosphere of strange enchantment, beheld through which the inhabitants have a propriety of their own. This atmosphere is what the American romancer needs. In its absence, the beings of imagination are compelled to show themselves in the same category as actually living mortals, a necessity that generally renders the paint and pasteboard of their composition but too painfully discernible. With the idea of partially obviating this difficulty, the sense of which has always pressed very heavily upon him, the author has ventured to make free with his old and affectionately remembered home at Brook Farm, as being certainly the most romantic episode of his own life, essentially a daydream, and yet...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?